So while we were in New York, we had one little problem actually with, well, two, but one with the airlines freezing. And so here's how this works. So the compressor generates air for the air accelerator, the air brakes, the air windshield wipers, and anything else that works on air pressure, the shifter mechanism, and a couple of little things. And so here's the compressor, and it calls for air, and this is the governor right here. The governor calls for air, and the compressor kicks in, and air comes through this line, and it initially goes to this muffler that's up here. You can kind of see. And a muffler is designed to remove the first level of moisture that gets into the system, and it collects in the bottom here. And you should daily drain it with this valve here, and it just spits out, sludge on the ground. It's nasty stuff. It's mostly just water, but has a little bit of oil mixed into it, so it's a little bit milky. And so I made sure that I drained that when I parked in New York, and we got off to a good start when we first started. But then about 15 minutes into our trip, one of the airlines clogged up, and this spitter valve that's on this thing that is right here, up on the top, this valve here, when it gets over pressurized, it releases the air. And so that was popping off every few seconds to release the air, which meant that there was no air going through the lines. So now we're under the front of the bus in the front wheel well, axle bulkheads. And this is the back bulkhead, and then the front bulkhead is on the opposite side. I'll show you that in a second. And the air comes into this primary tank, which is the first tank. They call it the wet tank, the primary tank, the number one tank. And it fills that up. And you can see this tank also has up there a relief valve for when it overcharges, and it will pop off when it gets above about 130 pounds or so. Anyway, so when we were having our problem, the spitter valve in the back was popping off, which kind of indicated that this tank wasn't getting any air. So I came up here with a torch and heated these lines, and I had a propane torch with me. I heated these lines until they cleared, and once they began to clear, the relief valve in the back stopped popping off, and the tanks began to fill up. Now this tank has a ejection valve, a water ejection valve, and it relieves a little bit of air every time the compressor loads to charge and unloads to stop charging. And this airline from the governor on the compressor controls this valve and causes it to release just a little bit of air and water to keep this tank dry. But in cold weather, this one's not heated, and that's going to be my next step, is to buy one that's heated. In cold weather, it doesn't do that. And so we're going to change that and fix it so that we're more equipped to deal with the cold weather. But then from there, the line going out comes up and then comes around to this tank, which is the number two tank. And this is the tank that the brakes operate off of. And it is also the tank that supplies the air to the most of the system. And so this is the dry tank, or the number two tank. And that is the airline coming out and going to the third tank, as well as to the services of the bus. And this is the line coming in. And so we heated all of these lines just to make sure that everything was clear when we got going, and we were able to get back on the road. So that was kind of what saved us. Now, the modern coaches and trucks and whatnot, they have a much more sophisticated air dryer system that helps keep things a little bit drier. They will get water. I mean, you do have to drain them. And this is the drain for this, and we'll see what comes out of it in a minute. And this is the drain for this one, and you just crank it up, and we'll see what comes out of that also. And we'll remove the water for now, and then we'll get maybe a new heated valve for here. Might move this valve to the other tank since it's not automatic, and see if we can improve our system here a little bit. Now, there shouldn't be any air pressure in here, but we're going to turn this valve in and see if it allows any water to come out. There might be a little bit of pressure in there. And if nothing comes out, oh, there we go. Doesn't look like it's working so good, huh? It was a real humid day when we were going to New York, but I can't imagine all of that water got in there. And that's a lot of water, actually. And we're not done yet. Can't imagine all that water got in there in that one trip, but it's possible, I guess. I don't really know. I mean, that's plain water too. That's not full of sludge and stuff. The sludge will be floating at the top because it's got oil mixed in it. Obviously, oil is lighter than water and it floats. So this is just clean, well, as clean as, I wouldn't drink it, but it's just oil-free water coming out of there at the moment. Not a good thing. Way, way, way more water than should have been in there. And I'm partially derelict in doing this on a regular basis because I thought this valve was doing the job and I just sort of gave up draining it by hand. So now we've reached the bottom of the tank. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on it from the back and see if anything else comes out. Alright, so to put a little air in there, there's a port here. There's a Schrader valve, and I've got my shop compressor hooked up to it. And I thought I had a little bit of air on my compressor, but it doesn't sound like it's got anything going through there. Anyway, I'll charge it up, and that's how we'll get the air in. I won't put very much in, just a few pounds. All right, now we have a few pounds of pressure on it. We'll see what else comes out of it. Some water. More water. Huh, no sludge. Really surprises me that that's all we're getting out of there. It also surprises me that that's all the air pressure that's coming out of there. I thought I had about 30 pounds on it. Let me turn this back up and see. Well, I learned something new today. When I charged the air system from the back, instead of the air going directly to the first tank, it goes directly to the second tank, which is where all the braking occurs from. I just drained off the air from the spitter valve. I put a little peanut butter cup under it, and you can see the kind of stuff that comes out of it. It's nasty looking yellow sort of sludge. And there wasn't much water that came out, but a lot of air and a lot of stuff blowing around out here. So this tank gets the air from the charge port in the back, but this tank, the first tank, gets the air from the compressor directly, and then that tank charges this tank, and then this tank charges the third tank, which is underneath the driver's seat in a compartment outside, which I'll show you in a minute. And that tank is a tank that controls the air accelerator and the windshield wipers and the accessories. And so the plan is to always have this tank from which you do your braking have the most air in it. And it's controlled with a series of valves that make sure that it does that. But I never knew that when I charged in the back with my floor compressor that it charged this tank before it charges the other tanks. Learn something new every day. Well, the third tank is located up in the front wheel, and I drain it every once in a while with this little valve, and you can do that like this. Nothing ever comes out of it, so I'm pretty confident that that tank stays dry pretty well, so I don't worry too much about draining it. In the end, what we did was I bought this valve that is a 12 volt or 24 volt electric valve, and it does two things. It has a heater in it so that it gets close to freezing, it thaws out the water that's in this primary tank. This is the first tank, and every 5 minutes it opens for 1 second and spits out whatever's at the bottom of this tank, which you can kind of see here. And then in front of the axle is the secondary tank. This is the braking tank, and this is the one you really want to keep dry. I took the valve that I had on there off, and this one is pneumatically controlled. You'll see that it has an air line that comes in on the side, and every time the compressor loads up or unloads, it shoots a burst of air through there. It opens the valve, and whatever's in the tank spits out through the tube here. And so hopefully it wasn't doing enough water removal from the first tank, and that was why we had too much water in there. So hopefully now this one will take the little bit of water that gets into the braking tank out in a sufficient manner, and the other valve will remove the primary amount of water, which is spitting off every 5 minutes, a longer opening and venting than this one does, and will take care of our water problems.